The antique lock clicked shut behind them, sealing Bennett Harrington and Zinla Methethwa inside the library while 200 guests waited below. "I tried to ignore you," Bennett said, his voice shaking as he pressed his back against the mahogany doors. His tuxedo was perfect, his bow tie precisely knotted, but his hands trembled as they gripped the wood. "I've spent weeks trying to pretend this doesn't exist." Zinle's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the floor, she could hear the orchestra, the murmur of Newport's elite, the clink of crystal. His mother's voice, sharp with fury, "Bennett Harrington, open this door immediately." He didn't move. His eyes, gray-blue like winter ocean, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "You walk into this house like you don't belong to anyone," he continued, moving toward her slowly, deliberately. "And it drives me insane. Bennett, I don't need to do anything except this." He reached her, his hands finding her waist, pulling her close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't want this." The door handle rattled violently. Adelaide Harrington's voice cut through. "If you don't open this door in 30 seconds, I will have the staff break it down." Zinle should push him away, should remember the cost, her dissertation, her funding, her entire future hanging by a thread. Should remember that men like him didn't choose women like her when the consequences became real. But his forehead was pressed to hers now, his breath ragged, his carefully constructed control completely shattered. "I'll ruin my family name for you," he whispered. "Just tell me to." "That's not what I want," her voice broke. "I want you to build something with me, not destroy everything for me." The 30 seconds expired. They heard the master key sliding into the lock. "Then we run," Bennett said. "Right now, before they open that door, before they make this decision for us." Zinle looked at him, this heir to an empire, this man who'd been taught since birth to sacrifice himself for dynasty and duty, now offering to throw it all away in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Where would we go?" "I don't care. Anywhere. Nowhere. Just away from this." The lock turned. She grabbed his hand. "The service stairs, now." They ran, leaving 200 guests and a lifetime of expectations behind them, the sound of Adelaide Harrington's fury echoing through the halls as they disappeared into the night. But this wasn't the beginning of their story. This was the breaking point. To understand how they arrived here, how an heir to American old money and a South African doctoral student destroyed their carefully constructed lives in the span of 8 weeks. We need to go back to the beginning, to the moment their eyes met, and neither looked away first. Zinle Methethwa had touched documents that survived slave ships, colonial conquests, and centuries of deliberate forgetting. She thought she understood the weight of history. Then, Bennett Harrington's mother showed her the family's private collection, and Zinle realized some legacies were still breathing. "These ledgers," Adelaide Harrington said, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the morning light through floor-to-ceiling windows, "document every Harrington business transaction since 1789. My son will inherit the responsibility of this archive, along with everything else." The leather-bound volumes lined mahogany shelves in the east study of the Harrington estate, each spine embossed with gold, ships' manifests, purchase orders, receipts of sale, the bureaucratic language of empire, preserved in climate-controlled perfection. Zinle ran her finger along a ledger dated 1823, her heart rate accelerating with professional hunger. This was why she'd flown 8,000 miles from Durban. Her dissertation on colonial maritime documentation needed primary sources like these, unfiltered, unedited, untouched by the sanitizing distance of academic archives. "The position is for 8 months, Adelaide continued. She wore her silver hair in a chignon that probably cost more than Zinle's monthly stipend to maintain. You'll digitize, catalog, and provide historical context. You'll work independently in the library. You won't be expected to attend family functions or—" The study door opened without a knock. Bennett Harrington walked in mid-sentence from Adelaide, clearly not expecting anyone, a leather briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been born on his body, his dark hair still damp from a shower, his tie slightly loosened. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a cologne advertisement titled Generational Wealth. His eyes met Zinle's. 3 seconds, that's all it took. In those 3 seconds, Zinhla watched something flicker across his face, surprise, then a flash of something sharper that made her spine straighten instinctively. He wasn't looking at her like staff. He was looking at her like she was an equation he couldn't immediately solve. She didn't look away first. Bennett stumbled, over the corner of an antique Persian rug that had probably been in his family longer than her country had been independent. His phone nearly slipped from his hand. He caught himself against the doorframe, his jaw tightening, and left without a single word. The door clicked shut. "That was my son," Adelaide said, her voice carrying a note Zinle couldn't quite identify. Amusement? Warning? "Bennett manages the family's investment portfolio. He's rarely here during business hours." "I see," Zinle said, though she didn't see anything except the afterimage of those eyes. Gray-blue like Newport's winter ocean, and just as cold. Adelaide returned to the contract terms, but Zinle noticed the older woman watching her now, with a sharper attention. Testing. "Bennett's engagement will be announced in 6 weeks, Adelaide said, as if commenting on the weather, to Charlotte Vanderberg, lovely girl. Her family's been in Newport almost as long as ours. The wedding will be next summer. Quite the undertaking. I mention it only because the estate will be busy with preparations. You'll need to work around the chaos." Zinle kept her expression neutral, professional. She was here for 18th century shipping records, not 21st century family drama. "That won't be a problem, Mrs. Harrington." "Good." Adelaide smiled, thin, knowing. "Then we'll see you Wednesday for orientation. Bennett insisted on giving you the library tour himself. He's quite particular about the collection." The Harrington Private Library occupied the entire West Wing's 3rd floor. 3 stories of books reached toward a domed ceiling, painted with a mural of the night sky. Constellations mapped by some long-dead Harrington with too much money and too much time. The smell hit Zinle first. Leather, aged paper, furniture polish, and something else. Old money. It had a scent, wood and wool, and the particular kind of dust that only accumulated in places where nothing was ever truly discarded. Temperature controlled, humidity monitored, silent except for the antique clock above the main fireplace, ticking away seconds that cost more than most people's hourly wage. "Miss Methethwa." She turned. Bennett stood in the doorway, somehow managing to make a simple white button-down and dark slacks look like a declaration of war. He'd dismissed the estate manager who was supposed to conduct this orientation. She'd watched the poor man scurry away with obvious relief. Now it was just the two of them in 10,000 square feet of books and unspoken tension. "Mr. Harrington," she kept her voice level, professional. "I wasn't expecting you to. I read your CV." He crossed the space between them, his footsteps absorbed by the antique rugs. "Your thesis on colonial trade route documentation, your work at the KwaZulu-Natal archives, the paper you published on the East India Company's deliberate destruction of records in Cape Town." Zinle blinked. She hadn't expected him to remember her name, let alone research her work. "I'm flattered." "Don't be." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "I needed to know if you were qualified to handle these materials. They're irreplaceable." "I understand that." "Do you?" He moved to a glass case, withdrew a first-edition ship's log, and placed it on the reading table between them. "This documented the Harrington family's first transatlantic voyage in 1789. My 5 times great-grandfather captained that ship. This is where our fortune started." Zinle approached the log carefully, her fingers itching to touch it, but holding back until permission was explicitly granted. The leather cover was cracked with age but beautifully preserved. She could see the captain's handwriting through the protective glass, neat, confident, assured of his place in the world. "What cargo?" she asked quietly. Bennett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me?" "What was the ship carrying?" Zinle met his eyes. Most people didn't ask. Most people pretended not to wonder. "Tobacco, cotton, sugar, what else?" The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. "And the people who harvested them?" she pressed, her voice still soft but unyielding. Bennett didn't look away. "That too." It was the most honest answer she'd received from anyone in this world of old money and older secrets. No euphemisms, no historical distancing, just that too. Something shifted in the air between them. "The collection is yours to explore," Bennett said, his voice rougher now. "I've had a workspace prepared by the south windows, best natural light. You'll have access codes for all the climate-controlled rooms. If you need anything, text this number." He handed her a business card. "It goes directly to me, not the estate manager." It's necessary." His hand brushed hers as she took the card, and they both froze. The contact lasted less than a second, but Zinla felt it down to her bones, a shock of heat that had nothing to do with the library's carefully regulated temperature. She pulled back first, tucking the card into her bag. Bennett moved toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. His knuckles were white with pressure. "Miss Methethwa." "Yes?" He didn't turn around. "Monday, during your interview, you didn't lower your eyes when I walked in." It wasn't a question, but Zinle answered anyway. "Should I have?" The silence stretched. "No," he said finally, and left. Zinle stood alone in the library, her heart hammering against her ribs, and realized she'd made a terrible mistake taking this job. Zinle lost track of time on her first Friday. She'd been cataloging a series of 1803 correspondence between Harrington Trading Company and their London partners, and the sun had set without her noticing. Her phone showed 11:47 p.m. The main staircase would still be lit, but the estate manager had told her to use the service stairs after 9 p.m., less likely to disturb the family. She gathered her things and slipped into the narrow back stairwell that had once been reserved for servants who were supposed to move through the house, like ghosts. She was halfway down when she collided with someone coming up. Papers scattered. Her bag hit the landing. Bennett Harrington grabbed her waist to stop her from tumbling backward, and suddenly they were pressed together in the narrow stairwell, breathing hard, his hands warm through her shirt. "Christ," he muttered, steadying her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." She pulled back, but there wasn't much room to maneuver. "I didn't think anyone else would be. I was escaping a family dinner." He crouched to gather her scattered notes, and she knelt beside him, their shoulders touching in the confined space. "My mother invited Charlotte and her parents, 6 courses of passive-aggressive interrogation about wedding venues." Zin grabbed for a paper at the same moment he did. Their hands collided over a photocopy of a ship's manifest. Neither of them moved. "I haven't been able to concentrate in a board meeting all week," Bennett said quietly, not looking at her. His thumb traced the edge of her wrist, just once, barely a touch. Zinle's breath caught. She pulled her hand away and stood, creating as much distance as the narrow stairwell allowed. "Mr. Harrington, Bennett." "Mr. Harrington," she insisted, "I need this position. I have 8 months of research funding left, and your family's archive is essential to my dissertation. Whatever this is." She gestured between them, at the electric air, at the way he was still kneeling on the stairs looking up at her like she was something rare and breakable. "It can't happen." He rose slowly, handed her the papers he'd collected. His face had gone carefully blank, that old money mask sliding back into place. "I know," he said. They stood there for another heartbeat, the stairwell light casting shadows across his face. Downstairs, she could hear the murmur of voices, laughter, the clink of crystal. His world, his life, his future wife probably, discussing flower arrangements and seating charts. "I should go," Zinl whispered. "Yes." Neither of them moved. Finally, Bennett stepped aside, pressing himself against the wall to let her pass. She had to brush past him, unavoidable in the narrow space. She felt the heat of him, smelled his cologne, cedar and something darker, and kept her eyes forward. She made it down 3 more steps before his voice stopped her. "Zinle." She froze. It was the first time he'd used her first name. The sound of it in his mouth felt like a match struck in darkness. "It's still Mr. Harrington," she said without turning around. She heard him exhale, something between a laugh and a surrender. "I know." Bennett Harrington had been trained since childhood in the art of warfare by other means, boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, the delicate diplomacy of old money society where fortunes rose and fell on the strength of a handshake and the precision of a slight. He'd never had to pursue anyone in his life. People came to him, investors, admirers, Charlotte with her pre-negotiated merger of dynasties. Zinle Mthethwa wasn't coming to him, so Bennett did something he'd never done before. He made the first move, then the second, then the third. He didn't text or call. That would cross a line, create evidence, become something his mother could leverage against them both. Instead, he waged a campaign of careful attention disguised as professional courtesy. Week 2, Monday. A first-edition copy of The Slave Ship, A Human History, appeared on Zinle's work table with a note in Bennett's precise handwriting. For context, BH. Week 2, Wednesday. He began taking his morning coffee at exactly 9 a.m., the moment Zinle arrived, using the library's side entrance he'd never used before in his life. They didn't speak beyond polite greetings, but he stayed for 30 minutes, working on his laptop at the far reading table while she organized files. The silence between them felt louder than conversation. Week 3, Tuesday. Instead of requesting digitization updates through the estate manager, Bennett appeared in person. "How's the 1790s correspondence progressing?" he'd ask, standing just slightly too close, his hand resting on the back of her chair while she showed him her cataloging system. Zinle maintained perfect professionalism. She called him Mr. Harrington, with a consistency that started to sound almost mocking. She kept every conversation strictly about archival methodology, document preservation, historical context. Her tone stayed level, her boundaries firm, her posture correct. But Bennett noticed the small rebellions. She started wearing her grandmother's beaded bracelet to work, red and white and black beads that clicked softly when she reached for books on high shelves. She told him once, in an unguarded moment, that her grandmother had raised her after her father died. The bracelet was the only thing she'd brought from home that wasn't practical. He noticed she hummed while she worked, softly, barely audible, songs he didn't recognize. Once, he looked up the melody later and discovered it was a Zulu hymn her grandmother used to sing. He noticed she took her tea with milk and too much sugar, and that she always brought her own from a thermos rather than using the estate's kitchen. Maintaining distance, remaining separate. One morning in week 3, Bennett found her on the rolling library ladder, stretching for a volume on the top shelf. Without thinking, he crossed the room and steadied the ladder base. She froze, one hand on a leather spine, the other gripping the rail. "Thank you," she said quietly, not looking down. "Zinle." Her hand tightened on the book. She descended the ladder slowly, each step deliberate, until she reached the bottom and turned to face him. They were inches apart, his hands still on the ladder rails, bracketing her. "It's still Mr. Harrington," she said. Bennett smiled, the first real, unguarded smile he'd given anyone in months, maybe years. "I know," but they both knew the walls were crumbling. Zinle wasn't attending the charity preview gala. She was working. That was the plan. That was safe. She'd stay in the library while 200 of Newport's elite gathered in the conservatory below, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than her monthly stipend, discussing their summer homes and investment portfolios and the fascinating inconvenience of having too much money. Bennett would be there with Charlotte, playing the role he'd been groomed for since birth, the perfect heir, the dutiful son, the future husband who'd merge 2 dynasties and produce appropriate children to inherit the empire. Zinle had made peace with this. She had. She was here for the archives, not for fairy tales about crossing impossible lines. At 6:47 p.m., while she was photographing a particularly fragile 1812 letter, she heard voices in the hallway outside the library. Quite unusual for Bennett to hire someone so international for such intimate access to family records. Zinle's hand stilled on the camera. "Mother, please. It's the 21st century. I'm sure the girl is perfectly qualified." That was Charlotte Vanderberg. Zinle had seen her photograph in the society pages, blonde, elegant, the kind of beautiful that came from generations of genetic selection and expensive orthodontia. Nevertheless, the older woman's voice dripped with generations of practiced cruelty. "The Harringtons have always had their hobbies. I remember when Bennett's uncle sponsored that Brazilian pianist. Ended poorly, as these things do." The library door was open a crack. Zinle could see them pass. Charlotte in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost what Zinla earned in 6 months, her mother in navy blue and pearls. How quaint, though, Charlotte continued, her voice fading as they moved down the hall. Bennett playing scholar with the help. I suppose everyone needs a distraction before the wedding. The words landed like a slap. Zinl set down her camera with exquisite care. Her hands were shaking, not with hurt but with fury, at them, at Bennett, at herself for feeling anything about any of this. She began packing her equipment, carefully, methodically. She'd finish the week, provide her notice, and return to South Africa with her dignity intact. There were other archives, other sources, other ways to finish her dissertation that didn't involve being anyone's hobby or distraction. She was sealing the last box when she heard the library door close. Bennett stood there in his tuxedo, bow tie slightly loosened, looking like every dangerous fantasy she'd been trying not to have. "Don't," he said, one word, a command, a plea. Zinl turned, her throat tight. "Don't what? Don't leave? Don't protect myself? Don't acknowledge that your fiancé just called me the help?" "She's not my fiancé." The world stopped. "What did you say?" Bennett crossed the space between them, and Zinle saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Fear. "I broke off the engagement this morning." Zinle couldn't breathe. "You... what?" "I told Charlotte and both our families that I wouldn't marry her." Bennett's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I didn't give them a reason because I don't owe them one. I don't know what this is between us, but I know I won't pretend it doesn't exist anymore." "That's insane." Zinle stepped back, hitting the table. "You tanked your engagement because of, what? A few conversations in a library? Some prolonged eye contact?" "Yes." The simplicity of it was devastating. Bennett. She used his first name for the first time and watched something flare in his eyes. "This is a terrible idea." "I know. I'm risking my dissertation funding, my professional reputation." "I know. Your family will destroy you. Charlotte's family will destroy you. You're throwing away everything," he finished. "I know, but I can't stand at that altar pretending I'm not completely consumed by thinking about you. That would be the real betrayal." Zinle's eyes burned. "You don't even know me." "Then let me." He took one step closer, giving her space to retreat. She didn't. "I've spent my entire life knowing exactly who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to want, how I'm supposed to behave. You walked into my family's library and looked at me like I was just a man. Not a legacy, not a portfolio. Just me. That's not enough to blow up your life for." "It's the first honest thing I've felt in 32 years. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, waiting. "That feels like enough." Zinle should walk away. She should maintain her boundaries, protect her research, be smart about the massive power imbalance between them. She should remember every warning her mother had ever given her about men like this, families like his, worlds that didn't want women like her. She should do all of that. Instead, she grabbed his collar and pulled him down to her. The kiss was not gentle. It was weeks of resistance shattering, professional boundaries incinerating, careful discipline dissolving into something raw and desperate. Bennett's hands found her waist, pulling her against him, and she wound her fingers into his hair, ruining its perfect styling. He tasted like champagne and bad decisions. She didn't care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett pressed his forehead to hers. "I need you to know," he said roughly. "This isn't a game to me. This isn't rebellion or curiosity or—" "Stop talking." Zinle kissed him again, softer this time but no less intense. "Just stop explaining. Stop trying to control this." He laughed against her mouth, something between joy and desperation. "I don't know how to not control things." "Learn." She pulled back enough to look at him. His hair was wrecked from her hands. His bow tie was undone. His careful composure was completely destroyed. He'd never looked more real. "This is still a terrible idea," she whispered. "I know. I'm probably going to regret this." "I know. I'm scared." Bennett's hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "I'm terrified, but I'm more scared of spending my life wondering what this could have been." Downstairs, the party continued. Upstairs, in the library, that held centuries of Harrington history, they rewrote the future with a kiss that tasted like freedom and felt like falling. They stole time like thieves. Bennett between board meetings, Zinle between archival sessions, 20 minutes in the library before the estate staff arrived, 30 minutes after they left, an hour on Wednesday afternoons when his schedule had a gap and her work hit a natural pause. Week 5. Bennett brought her to the private beach at dawn, when the fog still clung to the water and Newport slept behind its hedges and gates. They walked the shoreline, and Zinle told him about growing up in KwaZulu-Natal, the valley where her grandmother's house sat, the sound of evening prayers from the neighbor's radio, the weight of being the first in her family to leave Africa for education. "My father died when I was 8, she said, her feet bare in the cold sand. Heart attack. My mother tried to raise us alone, but..." She trailed off. "My grandmother took me in, raised me, funded my education by selling produce at the market every Saturday for 12 years. Bennett listened without interrupting, his hand finding hers. "She told me, the day I left for America, 'You carry us with you. Don't come back smaller than you left.'" Zinle's voice cracked. "Some days I don't know if I'm honoring that or betraying it." "Why betraying?" "Because I'm here with you instead of focusing on my work. Because I'm risking everything for..." She gestured at the ocean, the sky, the impossible situation. "This." Bennett pulled her close, his chin resting on her head. "What if this is part of your work? Understanding the human cost of what's in those ledgers, the people behind the transactions. That's a convenient justification. It's true anyway." Week 6. Zinl brought him to a Ghanaian restaurant in Providence, an hour from Newport. It was small, cramped, filled with people and noise and life that had nothing to do with trust funds or family names. Bennett was the only white person there. He ate jollof rice with his hands badly and laughed when Zinle corrected his technique. "You're terrible at this," she said. "I know." He grinned, sauce on his fingers. "Teach me." Week 7. They learned each other's bodies in careful increments. A kiss against the library ladder, his hand under her shirt in his car parked behind the groundskeeper's shed, her hands learning the architecture of his shoulders, his back, the vulnerable hollow of his throat. They didn't cross certain lines, not yet. As if maintaining some boundaries could keep the situation manageable, containable, something that could be undone if necessary. They were lying to themselves. Bennett began learning phrases in isiZulu, badly, his pronunciation making Zinle laugh until she cried. She taught him to say, "Nyakuthanda, I love you," but told him he wasn't allowed to use it yet. "Why not?" "Because you don't know if you mean it yet. You might just love the idea of this, of us as rebellion." "That's not..." "Prove it," she challenged. "Don't tell your family, don't make a grand gesture. Just be with me, quietly. Let it be real before you make it a war." So Bennett kept their secret and hated every second of it. He hated lying to his mother at breakfast, hated deflecting questions from his remaining friends about why he'd ended things with Charlotte, hated the carefully blank expression he maintained when Adelaide mentioned finding him an appropriate match soon. But he treasured the stolen mornings with Zinle, the afternoons when she'd look up from a document and smile at him like he was the best surprise of her day, the evenings when they'd text in code, academic questions that were really love letters. Progress on the 1803 correspondence? Revelatory. Changed my entire perspective. Mine too. They began to believe they could make it work quietly, carefully. Bennett would tell his family after the social season ended, when the pressure eased. Zinle would finish her research and return to South Africa, and they'd figure out the distance. They were both lying to themselves. The world was too small for secrets this big. Tuesday, week 8. Zinle woke to 17 missed calls. Her phone was exploding. Texts from colleagues, friends in South Africa, her doctoral supervisor, numbers she didn't recognize. She grabbed it with sleep-blurred eyes and felt her heart stop. Subject: Harrington Heir's mystery. Woman. Who is she? The photograph was beautiful, in a devastating way. Bennett and Zinle on the private beach, dawn light turning everything gold, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at the ocean like they were the only two people in the world. They'd been so careful. They'd been so careful. But someone with a telephoto lens had been more careful. The blog post was already being picked up by society pages. Sources confirm the woman is Dr. Zinla Manthethwa, PhD candidate actually, close enough, a South African researcher working in the Harrington private archives. Bennett Harrington broke off his engagement to Charlotte Vanderberg last month amid rumors of irreconcilable differences. This photo suggests the truth was somewhat more specific. Zinle's phone rang. Her supervisor, Dr. Patricia Whitmore. "Zinle, we need to talk." 20 minutes later, Zinle sat in her apartment, still in her pajamas, listening to her career implode. "The university has received inquiries," Dr. Whitmore said carefully, "about the appropriateness of your research arrangement, about potential conflicts of interest. I've done nothing inappropriate with the archives. I'm not questioning your academic integrity. I'm telling you about optics." Dr. Whitmore sighed. "The Vanderberg family donates significantly to the history department. They're making noise about bias, about access being granted for personal reasons, rather than academic merit." "That's ridiculous. I was hired before I even met." "I know, but we have to address the concerns. I'm asking you to consider taking a leave of absence from the project, just until this settles down." "That's not a leave of absence. That's termination disguised as concern." Silence. "I'm sorry, Zinle. I really am. But I have an entire department to protect." Zinle hung up and stared at her phone as more messages rolled in. Her mother, from Durban. "Baby, please call me. What's happening? These families don't let people like us win." Her best friend from Cape Town. "Girl, that's a whole Harrington. Are you insane?" A number she didn't recognize. "Gold-digging bitch." Another. "He'll never marry you." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Bennett. She declined it. Within an hour, a car arrived at her apartment. Not Bennett's, a black town car with the Harrington estate insignia. The driver handed her a handwritten note from Adelaide Harrington. "Miss Manthethwa, please come to the estate at your earliest convenience. We have matters to discuss. A.H." It wasn't a request. Adelaide Harrington received Zinle in the same study where they'd first met. But this time, Bennett was already there, standing by the windows with his jaw clenched and his hands fisted at his sides. "Sit down, Miss Manthethwa," Adelaide said. "I'd prefer to stand." Adelaide's eyebrows rose fractionally. "As you wish." She placed a folder on the desk between them. "I'll be direct. This situation has become untenable. The Vanderberg family is threatening to withdraw their funding from the Harrington Foundation's education initiative. That's 10,000 students who depend on scholarship money. The board is demanding Bennett step down from his position, and your university has expressed concerns about the integrity of your research arrangement." Zinle's nails bit into her palms. "With respect, Mrs. Harrington, none of those things are my fault." "No," Adelaide agreed. "They're the natural consequences of poor judgment, Bennett's and yours." "Mother," Bennett started. Adelaide held up a hand. "I'm speaking to Miss Manthethwa." She turned back to Zinle. "I'm prepared to offer you a generous compensation package, 6 months of research funding, full access to replicate any documents you've already cataloged, and a professional reference that will open doors at other institutions. In exchange, you'll sign an NDA regarding this situation and terminate your contract effective immediately." The room spun. "You're paying me to leave. I'm offering you a dignified exit from an impossible situation." Adelaide's voice wasn't unkind, just utterly sure of its own logic. "You're a brilliant young woman with a promising career. Don't sacrifice it for a relationship that will only bring you pain and scrutiny." "That's not your decision to make," Bennett said, his voice ice. "It's mine," Zinle said quietly. Both Harringtons turned to her. Zinle looked at Bennett, really looked at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his whole body was coiled to fight his mother, his family, his entire world. For her. She thought about the scholarship program. 10,000 kids. She thought about her own doctoral funding, gone. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone. "These families don't let people like us win." "I need to speak with Bennett alone," Zinle said. Adelaide stood. "You have 15 minutes, then I expect your decision." She left, closing the door with a soft final click. Bennett crossed to Zinl, immediately reaching for her. She stepped back. "Don't," she said, Zinli. "You said you broke off the engagement. You didn't tell me you'd tank a charity program to do it." Her voice shook. 10,000 kids, Bennett. I'll restore the funding. I always plan to. With what leverage? You've already spent your rebellion on me. She pressed her palms against her eyes. God, I knew this was a mistake. I knew it. Don't say that. Bennett's voice cracked. Please don't say that. What do you want me to say? That I'm willing to watch you lose everything? That I'm okay being the weapon your family uses against you? She laughed bitterly. I'm not that selfish, even if you are. If I'm selfish, it's because you're the first person I've ever wanted to be selfish for. He grabbed her shoulders, making her look at him. Everyone in my life has been temporary or transactional. You're the first person I've wanted to keep. The words hit like a physical blow. That's exactly the problem, Zinle whispered. You want to keep me, like I'm another acquisition, another thing in your collection. That's not. You're trying to manage this, control it, make it perfect. She pulled away from his grip. Some things can't be perfected, Bennett. Some things are just impossible. So you're leaving. I don't see another option. Bennett's face went very still. When he spoke, his voice was barely controlled. Then you're a coward. The word hung between them like a slap. Zinhale's eyes burned. Maybe I am, but at least I'm a coward who understands that love isn't enough when the cost is too high. Love, Bennett seized on the word. You said love. Don't you love me? That's not the point. It's the only point. He backed her against the desk, his hands braced on either side of her, not touching but close enough that she felt surrounded. Say it. If you're going to leave, at least be honest. Zinle's breath came in short gasps. Fine. Yes, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. And that's exactly why I have to leave before we destroy each other. Bennett closed his eyes, something like pain crossing his face. When he opened them again, they were wet. If you walk away now, I can't follow you. My mother will make sure of that. The family will close ranks. You'll lose your research access permanently, and I'll lose the only real thing I've ever had. Then maybe we were doomed from the start. The 15 minutes were up. Adelaide knocked once, then entered. Her expression revealed nothing. Miss Methethwa, your decision. Zinle looked at Bennett one last time, memorizing his face, the way the light caught in his eyes, the set of his jaw. I'll take your offer, Mrs. Harrington. Week 9. Zinle was supposed to be packing. Instead, she sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen, unable to move. She'd signed Adelaide's NDA, accepted the compensation, arranged to have her preliminary research materials shipped to Cape Town. She should be relieved, safe, free. She felt like she was bleeding out from a wound no one else could see. Her phone rang. Dr. Whitmore. Zinla, I have unfortunate news. Her supervisor's voice was tight. The Vanderburg family has made a formal complaint to the university about your research arrangement. They're alleging impropriety in how you gained access to the Harrington archives. That's insane. Adelaide Harrington herself hired me before I ever... I know, but the optics are terrible, and the Vanderburgs are major donors. The committee has decided to suspend your research funding pending an investigation. I'm so sorry. Zinle's hands went numb. How long? 6 to 8 months. Maybe longer, which meant Zinl couldn't finish her dissertation on schedule, which meant she'd lose her doctoral program, which meant 8 years of work gone. She hung up and pulled on her coat. She'd left some personal items at the library, a thermos, a notebook, her grandmother's bracelet she'd forgotten in her rush to leave. She needed to collect them before she lost the courage to go back at all. The estate was chaos when she arrived. Caterers streaming through service entrances, florists arranging massive displays in the conservatory, staff in formal dress preparing for the evening's event. Despite Bennett breaking the engagement, the Harrington and Vanderburg families were proceeding with a joint charity initiative, cementing their alliance in business even if not in marriage. Bennett was expected to attend, smile, play the part, pretend his life hadn't imploded, conform or be exiled from family resources entirely. Zinle slipped through the service entrance, invisible in her jeans and jacket among the chaos of preparation. No one stopped her. Why would they? She was nobody. Nothing. A temporary employee who'd already been compensated for her trouble. The library was exactly as she'd left it, except emptier somehow. Her workstation cleared, her notes boxed, the materials she'd cataloged sealed back in their climate-controlled cases, 8 months of work erased. She found her thermos on the window ledge, her notebook under the reading table, but her grandmother's bracelet wasn't in the drawer where she thought she'd left it. She searched frantically, checking every surface, every shelf, her panic rising. "Looking for this?" Zinnel spun around. Bennett stood in the doorway, holding the beaded bracelet carefully in his palm. He was already dressed for the gala, black tuxedo, bow tie perfectly knotted. He looked every inch the heir to an empire. He also looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I found it near the ladder," he said quietly. "I've been keeping it safe." Zinle's throat closed. "Thank you." She reached for it. He pulled it back slightly. "Why are you here, Zinle?" "Getting my things." That's not an answer. She met his eyes, and something in her chest cracked. He looked devastated, destroyed, like she'd taken something essential when she'd walked away. "I lost my funding," she said. The words came out flat, numb. "The Vanderbergs complained to the university. I'm suspended from my program pending investigation. I can't finish my dissertation." Bennett's face went white. No, I'll fix this. I'll call the university, I'll handle the Vanderbergs. You can't fix this." Zinnel took the bracelet from his hand, fastening it around her wrist with shaking fingers. "It's already done." "Then I'll fund your research independently, through a grant, anonymously, whatever you need." "Bennett, stop." "I won't stop. You're walking away from your life's work because my family—" "Our family!" The words burst out of her. "Our impossible, destructive situation that never should have happened. I knew better. I knew the cost and I did it anyway, and now I'm paying for it. This is on me as much as you." From the conservatory below, she heard the orchestra tuning. The gala was starting. Bennett looked toward the sound, his jaw clenching. "I have to go down there. Stand next to Charlotte's parents. Smile for photographs. Pretend that my mother didn't bribe you to leave me." "She didn't bribe me. She offered me a way out." "Same thing." "No." Zinle stepped closer, desperate for him to understand. "She offered me dignity. A chance to finish my degree somewhere else, away from this mess. Maybe she was right." "Don't defend her to me." Bennett's voice turned hard. "And don't stand here telling me you think walking away was right when I can see in your face that you're dying inside." "What I feel doesn't matter. The cost is too high." "For who? For me?" He laughed bitterly. "I'm willing to pay it." "That's the problem." Zinle's voice broke. "You think you can just pay for everything, fix everything, control everything. You wanted to keep me like I'm something you add to your collection. But I'm a person, Bennett. I have a life and work and dreams that exist completely separate from you, and they're being destroyed." "Then let me help you rebuild them." "I don't want your help. I don't want your money or your family's connections or any of it." She was crying now, furious and heartbroken. "I just wanted you. Just you as you are, not as what you can fix or provide or control." Bennett stared at her like she'd struck him. Below, the orchestra began playing. Voices rose, guests arriving, the society pages getting their photographs, the Harringtons and Vanderbergs presenting their united front. "I have to go," Bennett said hoarsely. "I know." Neither of them moved. "Zinle, don't." She wiped her eyes roughly. "Just go. Play your part. Save what you can of your family relationships. I'll be gone before you get back." Bennett made it halfway down the library stairs before he turned around. Muscle memory almost carried him to the conservatory. Years of training, of doing what was expected, of prioritizing family over self. He descended the main staircase in his perfect tuxedo, nodded to arriving guests, accepted champagne from a passing server. Through the glass doors, he could see his mother with Mr. Vanderberg, both smiling for cameras. Charlotte in ice blue silk, gracious in her role as the woman who'd been wronged but had risen above it. The elaborate floral arrangements, the string quartet, the performance of civilization, his entire future laid out like a map with every turn predetermined. He looked up at the library windows, could see Zinele's silhouette moving inside, packing, preparing to disappear from his life forever. Bennett set down his champagne glass, turned, walked back up the stairs. His mother called his name. He didn't stop. By the time he reached the library, he was nearly running. He threw open the doors, closed them behind him, and turned the antique lock, the one that hadn't been used in decades. Zinle spun around, a box of her materials in her arms. "What are you—" "I tried to ignore you," Bennett said, his voice shaking. His back was against the doors, his hand still on the lock. From below, he could hear voices rising in confusion, people looking for him, realizing he'd disappeared. "Bennett, you need to go back down there." "I can't." He crossed to her, pulled the box from her hands, set it aside. "I've tried. For weeks I've tried to figure out how to make this work within the rules, how to keep everyone happy, how to maintain my family relationships while also having you. I can't do it." "Then let me go." Zinle's eyes were wet. "Let me be the thing you sacrifice so you can keep the rest." "No." "Bennett, you walk into this house like you don't belong to anyone," he said roughly, "and it drives me insane. Because everyone in my life belongs to something. To the family, to the company, to the society pages, to the expectations. But you—" His hands found her waist, pulled her close. "You belong to yourself. You answer to yourself. You look at me like I'm just a man, and it's the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I've ever experienced." Below, the voices were getting louder. Someone tried the door handle. "Bennett Harrington, open this door immediately!" His mother's voice, sharp with fury. Bennett ignored. Her, his attention fixed entirely on Zinle. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll unlock the door and let you go. But if there's any part of you that wants to fight for this, want doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." The door handle rattled again. His mother's voice, harder now. "Bennett!" Time slowed. Zinle looked at him, at this man who'd been groomed since birth to sacrifice himself for dynasty and duty, now standing in his family's library, prepared to blow up everything for a relationship that terrified them both. She saw him clearly, not as a hero or a villain, not as a solution to her problems or a problem in himself, just as a man who was tired of being perfect and brave enough to finally break. "You're going to regret this," she whispered. "I know. Your mother will never forgive you. I know. I can't promise this will work. I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can't promise—" Bennett kissed her, cutting off her litany of warnings. The kiss was soft, desperate, full of the terror of leaping without a net. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I don't need promises. I just need you to stay." The door rattled violently. Adelaide's voice was ice now. "If you don't open this door in the next 30 seconds, I will have the staff break it down." "We should run," Zinle said suddenly. Bennett blinked. "What?" "Right now, out the back stairs. We get in your car and we just drive. Somewhere they can't control the situation, somewhere we can think without your family orchestrating every move." It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most honest impulse either of them had had in weeks. "Where would we go?" "I don't know." Zinle laughed through her tears. "Somewhere mediocre, somewhere your name doesn't open doors. A Holiday Inn, a diner, a library in a town that's never heard of the Harringtons." The 30 seconds expired. They heard the master key in the lock. Bennett grabbed Zinle's hand. "The service stairs, now." They ran. They made it to Bennett's car, not the Mercedes his family would look for, but the old Land Rover he kept in the far garage, the one he used for anonymous trips to Home Depot and late-night drives to clear his head. They drove north for 2 hours, pulling off at a nothing town in New Hampshire whose main street consisted of 3 traffic lights and a gas station. Bennett parked behind a mid-tier hotel that advertised continental breakfast and free Wi-Fi. They sat in the car, engine ticking as it cooled, both breathing hard. "My mother's going to send people looking for us," Bennett said. "I know. This is going to make everything worse. I know." He turned to look at her. "I have no plan, no solution, no idea how to make this work." "I know." Zinle squeezed his hand. "But at least you're not trying to control it anymore." They checked into the hotel under Bennett's rarely used middle name, James, and paid in. Cash. The room was aggressively beige, floral bedspread, landscape painting bolted to the wall, shower with weak water pressure. It was perfect. They sat on the edge of the bed, not touching, both waiting for the adrenaline to wear off and reality to sink in. I just walked out of a gala in front of 200 people, Bennett said. I just helped you. My mother's going to freeze my accounts. My mother's going to have a heart attack when I call her. We're unemployed, academically suspended, probably about to be disinherited, and hiding in a Holiday Inn. Yes. Bennett looked at her, started laughing. The sound was slightly unhinged, edged with hysteria, but genuine. Zinle started laughing too. Within seconds, they were both doubled over, gasping, tears streaming down their faces, laughing at the absurdity of their situation and the terror and the relief of finally being honest about how completely they destroyed their carefully constructed lives. When the laughter finally subsided, Bennett pulled out his phone. 23 missed calls, 47 texts, 3 voicemails from his mother that he deleted without listening. I should call her, he said. Explain. Later. Zinle took the phone from his hands, set it aside. Right now, just be here, with me, without fixing anything. So he did. They talked through the night, really talked, without the weight of the Harrington estate around them, without the fear of being discovered. Zinle told him about the years of financial struggle that had funded her education, about her grandmother selling at the market, about the pressure of carrying her family's dreams on her shoulders. Bennett told her about the loneliness of being groomed for leadership since childhood, about having every decision pre-made, about the suffocating weight of living up to a legacy he'd never chosen. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Bennett asked, "What do you actually want? Not what you should want or what's practical or what makes sense, just what do you want?" Zinle was quiet for a long time. "I want to finish my dissertation, on my terms, with my integrity intact. I want to make my grandmother proud. I want to build something that matters, something that doesn't depend on family money or connections or any of it." "And us?" She looked at him. This man who'd risked everything, who'd locked a library door and chosen her over a dynasty. "I want to figure out if we can build something together that doesn't require either of us to lose ourselves." Bennett nodded slowly. "What if we can't? Then at least we'll know we tried, honestly, without all the performance." They fell asleep as the sun rose, fully clothed on top of the covers, Bennett's arm around her waist, Zinle's grandmother's bracelet still on her wrist. Bennett returned to Newport alone 3 days later, not because Zinle sent him away, but because running wasn't the answer either. "Go back," she'd said on their last morning in New Hampshire. "Face them, not for their approval, for your own integrity. Figure out who you actually are when you're not reacting to their pressure or rebelling against it. And you? I'm going home, to Durban, to figure out what I want to build that's mine." So they separated. No dramatic promises, no guarantees, just an agreement to do the hard work separately before trying to do it together. He returned to find his trust fund access restricted and his position on the family board suspended. His mother refused to speak to him for 6 weeks. Charlotte's family issued a statement through their publicist describing his erratic behavior and poor judgment. The society pages had a field day, but something unexpected happened. Without the weight of family expectations, Bennett discovered he'd been carrying responsibilities he'd never actually chosen. The board meetings where his opinion had been predetermined. The charitable causes he'd supported because they looked good, rather than because he cared. The entire performance of being a Harrington heir. He started therapy, actual sit in an office and talk therapy, not the family counseling that was really dynasty management coaching. His therapist, Dr. Nina Okafor, was unimpressed by his last name and unwilling to let him intellectualize his way out of emotional honesty. "What do you want to build?" she asked in their 4th session. "I don't know." "Then figure it out, not what you should want, what you actually want." Bennett spent weeks with that question, sat in coffee shops in Providence where no one knew his face, visited the public library, talked to people who'd never heard of the Harringtons and didn't care about generational wealth. Slowly, an answer emerged. He wanted to use his access and privilege to dismantle the barriers that kept people like Zinle from accessing resources that people like him took for granted. He established an independent scholarship fund for African doctoral students studying in the U.S. Not through the Harrington Foundation, through his own efforts, using the portion of his inheritance he controlled directly. He named it after Zinle's grandmother, Namusa Mthethwa, after getting permission through Zinle's academic advisor. He didn't tell Zinl directly. This wasn't a grand gesture designed to win her back. It was work that needed doing regardless of what happened between them. She returned to Durban to find her mother equal parts furious and terrified. Do you understand what you've involved yourself in? These families don't forgive. They destroy. I know, Mama. Then why? Zinle thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because I spent so long trying to be perfect. The perfect student, the perfect granddaughter, the perfect example of what our family could achieve, that I forgot to be honest. Bennett helped me remember what that felt like. Her grandmother was gentler. Do you love him? Yes. Does he love you? I think so, but we don't know if love is enough. Gogo patted her hand. Love is never enough, child. Love is just the beginning. The question is, will you both do the work? Zinle found alternative funding through a Cape Town University program. The research was slower, harder, without access to the Harrington archives, but it was uncompromised. She wrote the most honest chapter of her dissertation yet, about the emotional weight of archival work, about touching the documentation of atrocity and wealth built on exploitation, about the human cost behind the neat columns of historical ledgers. She let herself miss Bennett, stopped pretending it had just been an affair or a mistake, allowed it to be what it was, a relationship that had mattered deeply but might not have been sustainable. She didn't know yet. Neither of them did. 4 months after their separation, a letter arrived at Zinle's university program. Actual mail, handwritten, international postage, taking 6 weeks to reach her. She recognized Bennett's handwriting on the envelope. Inside, 3 pages. His writing was precise, controlled, but she could see where his hand had hesitated, where he'd chosen words carefully. Dear Zinle, I'm writing instead of calling because I need to say this without interruption, and I need you to be able to read it in your own time, not when I ambush you with a phone call. I'm sorry. Not for loving you. I'll never apologize for that. But for trying to control the situation, for thinking I could manage my way through something that required honesty instead of strategy, for putting you in a position where my family could use you as a weapon against me, for not understanding the cost you were paying until it was too late. I've established a scholarship fund in your grandmother's name. Not to win you back or prove anything to you, but because the work needed doing. African doctoral students studying in the U.S. face barriers I never had to consider. Access to archives, funding, visa complications, academic gatekeeping. If I can use my privilege to dismantle some of those barriers, I will. The fund is managed independently of my family. They can't touch it. Neither can I, actually. I've set it up with an oversight board to ensure it serves its actual purpose, rather than becoming another Harrington vanity project. I'm telling you this not because I want credit, but because transparency matters. You deserve to know what I'm doing with the resources I have. I'm learning to build instead of destroy, to act from purpose rather than reaction, to understand the difference between controlling an outcome and committing to work regardless of the outcome. I don't know if any of this matters to you. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. But I wanted you to know that loving you changed me, not in the dramatic life explosion way it seemed like at first, but in the quieter, more fundamental way of making me ask who I actually want to be. Thank you for that. Yours. If you'll have me, and honestly even if you won't. Bennett Zinl read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called him. It was 3 a.m. in Newport, 9 a.m. in Durban. Bennett answered on the first ring, his voice rough with sleep. Zinle? The scholarship is a good start. Silence. Then, a start? What's next? She heard him exhale, relief, joy, terror, all mixed together. I don't know. I'm figuring it out without a blueprint. Zinl smiled. Good. They rebuilt slowly, carefully, without the weight of the Harrington estate between them. Month 5. Video calls twice a week. Nothing romantic, just updates on their separate work. Bennett told her about the scholarship recipients he was meeting with. Zinle told him about her research progress. They talked about books, politics, the complications of trying to do meaningful work within corrupt systems. They were learning each other as actual people, not as a rebellion or escape. Month 6. Bennett came to Cape Town for a Foundation site visit. He told Zinle he was coming, didn't ask permission, didn't make it about them, just informed her that he'd be in the country for 2 weeks if she wanted to meet. She thought about it for 3 days before responding. Coffee. Just coffee. They met at a cafe near the university. Bennett arrived 10 minutes early, nervous as a teenager, his palms sweating. When Zinle walked in, he stood so abruptly he knocked over his water glass. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They sat, ordered coffee. The conversation was stilted at first, both of them hyper-aware of every word, every glance, the massive weight of everything unsaid. Then Bennett asked about her grandmother, and Zinle started talking, and the words came easier. She told him about Gogo's reaction to the scholarship fund. She cried. Then she told me to bring you the home so she could meet the man who named something after her but was too afraid to visit. Bennett laughed, genuinely, fully, the sound making Zinle's chest tight with how much she'd missed it. Would she actually want to meet me? She demands it, actually, says any man who flies 8,000 miles to ask for coffee is either in love or insane, and she needs to determine which. What if it's both? Zinle met his eyes across the table. Then you'll fit right in with our family. 1 week later, Bennett stood on the porch of a modest house in a valley outside Durban, holding a gift basket that suddenly seemed wildly inadequate, trying not to panic. Zinle squeezed his hand. Breathe. I'm breathing. You look like you're about to pass out. I might be. The door opened. Nomusa Mthethwa stood there in a bright print dress, her hair wrapped in a doke, her eyes sharp and assessing. She looked Bennett up and down once, said something in icy Zulu, and walked back inside, leaving the door open. What did she say? Bennett whispered. She said you're too thin and you dress like you're afraid of wrinkling. That's accurate. They entered. The house was small, immaculate, filled with the smell of cooking and the sounds of family. Zinle's mother, Thandiwe, watched him with protective skepticism. Her uncle, Saifo, shook his hand with a grip that felt like a warning. Her younger cousins Googled his net worth on their phones and whispered to each other. Dinner was chaos, multiple conversations in isiZulu and English, children running through, plates being passed, Bennett trying to navigate unfamiliar foods with grace and failing spectacularly. Gogo watched it all with those sharp eyes. After dinner, she pulled Bennett aside to the back porch. Spoke to him in isiZulu, Zinle translating. She says you have soft hands, you've never worked hard in your life. Bennett looked at his hands, manicured, uncalloused, proof of generations of people who paid others to do physical labor. She's right, Gogo continued, her voice firm. She says love is work, every day, not big gestures, small choosing, waking up and choosing again, when it's hard, when it's boring, when it's not exciting anymore. Zinle's voice caught slightly as she translated, and Bennett realized this wasn't just wisdom for him, it was wisdom for both of them. He looked at Gogo and spoke carefully in the isiZulu Zinle had taught him. Nyakonda, ngizimisele ukwenza umsebenzi. I understand. I'm committed to doing the work. His pronunciation was terrible. Gogo's face remained stern. Then she smiled. Just a little, a crack in the assessment. She said something else in isiZulu, patted his cheek, and went back inside. What did she say? Bennett asked. Zinle was crying. She said, you're teachable. That's more important than being right. 6 months after the library confrontation, 1 year after they'd first met, they didn't move in together. They didn't get engaged. They didn't take the easy path of dramatic romantic gestures and happily ever after proclamations. They did something harder. They built across 2 continents. Bennett restructured his life to split time between Newport, managing what remained of his family responsibilities, slowly rebuilding relationships with his mother through honest conversation rather than performance, and South Africa, growing the Foundation's work, learning systems of inequality he'd never had to consider. Zinle finished her doctorate and took a position with the Foundation as Director of Archival Partnerships, creating access to historical documents for African scholars, dismantling the gatekeeping she'd experienced firsthand. They had an office in Cape Town, a shared apartment they each used when in the other city, and a relationship that was complicated, international, and imperfect. They argued about work-life balance and whose turn it was to fly 8,000 miles. They struggled with visa complications and time zones and the reality that love across continents required constant, deliberate effort. Some months were easier than others. Some months they barely saw each other. Some months they questioned whether they were choosing each other or just choosing the idea of what they represented. But they kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept choosing honesty over performance. A year after the library confrontation, they returned to Newport together for a foundation gala, one they had organized together, featuring scholarship recipients presenting their research. They prepared in the Harrington Library. Adelaide had agreed to partially open it to visiting scholars, a concession Bennett had negotiated carefully, a way of using the family's resources for actual good rather than private preservation. Zinl stood by the windows, looking out at the grounds where they had had their first real conversation. Bennett caught her reflection in the glass. "Are you nervous?" he asked. She turned, terrified. "Good." She crossed to him, straightening his tie, a small intimacy they had earned through months of careful building. "That means it matters." Below, guests were arriving, not just society pages and old money, but scholars, students, activists, people whose presence made the Harrington estate mean something beyond dynasty. Bennett took Zinli's hand. "My mother's down there." "I know. She's trying. We're not close, but we're trying." "That's enough." They walked to the library doors together, paused. "I love you," Bennett said. Not in the dramatic burn-everything-down way, in the wake-up every morning and choose-you way, even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when it's not exciting anymore. Zinle smiled through sudden tears. "Nyakutanda. I love you." His pronunciation had improved. "Nami Nyakutanda. I love you too." They walked down to the gala together, not hiding, not performing, just present. Two people who'd destroyed their carefully constructed lives and built something real from the rubble. The library behind them held centuries of Harrington history, ships' logs and ledgers and the bureaucratic documentation of empire. But it also held something new now, access, transparency, and the beginning of something that looked like repair. Not redemption, not absolution, just the slow, difficult work of building something better. Zinl stood in the valley outside Durban, watching Bennett try to help her uncle repair a fence. He was terrible at it, his hands still soft, his technique laughable. But he was trying, sweat soaking through his shirt, listening to instructions in isiZulu he was still learning. Her grandmother sat on the porch, shelling peas, watching with those sharp eyes. "He's still here," Gogo said in isiZulu. "That's something." "Yes," Zinle joined her on the porch. "That's something. Are you happy?" Zinle thought about the question, about the complicated reality of building a life with someone across continents and cultures and class divides that didn't disappear just because you loved each other. About the morning arguments over whose turn it was to compromise, about the visa renewals and academic politics and foundation board meetings where they didn't always agree, about the work, the constant, unglamorous work of choosing each other when the romance faded and the reality set in. "I'm building something real," she said finally, "with someone who's willing to show up. That's better than happy." "Good," Gogo said. "Happy is easy. Real is what matters." Bennett looked up from the fence, caught Zinle's eye, and smiled. Covered in dirt, completely out of his element, exactly where he'd chosen to be. She smiled back. Not a fairy tale ending, something better. An honest beginning, earned through work and sustained by choice. The Harrington Library still held its secrets, centuries of wealth built on exploitation, preserved in climate-controlled perfection. But it also held visiting scholars now, African students accessing primary sources, truth being told alongside the carefully curated history. Bennett and Zinl hadn't fixed the past. They couldn't. But they were building something different for the future. That was enough.